Here is a motion picture film. Let's tidy up this tangle of film by putting it on a reel.
I want my $200.
What's that?
I want my $200. I heard you through the door talking to that man. It's my money you got, and I want it.
Now, you just hold on a second.
I want my money. You took my $200.
Will you quiet down? You hear?
I want my $200.
Hold on. Just hold on. Let me explain something to you.
It ain't as if you was my pa. That'd be different.
Well, I ain't your pa, so just get that out of your head. I don't care what those neighbor ladies said.
I look like
You
that.
don't look nothing like me. You don't look any more like me than you do that Coney Island. Eat that damn thing, you hear?
We got the same job.
Lots of people got the same jaw.
It's possible.
No, it ain't possible.
Then I want my $200.
All right.
Hello, listeners. This is Film Swap, and my name is David Seeley. And I'd like to introduce you to someone who's got bone structure, and he's also the ecstatic gaucho himself, and his name is Jonathan Pritchard Barrett, my esteemed Film Swap co-host. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm very well, David. How do you do?
Well, I'm all right. It's the beginning of November, and we have a very, very special guest tonight who's going to, we've packed some sandwiches, and we've packed our satchel, and we're starting to walk on down the highway. We're extending our thumbs as we go, and we're going to go tonight on a little road trip. And Jonathan, would you like to introduce our special guest for us tonight?
Well, tonight we have a very special guest who is a colleague of mine, but he's an ace copywriter. He is a film producer, director, screenwriter, and I think he's our first guest with an actual IMDb page. Which is quite an accolade as far as I'm concerned. And his name is Ken Williams. Hi, Ken.
Hi, gents. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Well, thank you for taking time out to talk to us tonight. It's really great.
No worries.
So tonight, the subject of our show is road movies.
Yeah.
And Ken, I understand that you're a bit of a road movie fan, and you've picked a really interesting film for us to talk about tonight. Would you first like to just tell us a little bit about your journey along the road to discovering this film? Did you see what I did there?
I did. Fantastic. I'm expecting lots more of those from Jonathan in particular, fellow ace copywriter. Yeah, so road movies, I guess I've always loved them. I mean, it's a brilliant genre. But recently, in the last 10 years or so, I've written a road movie, an ongoing project that has been through loads of drafts that I've put loads of work into. So I've seen, I'd say, most of the modern road movies, particularly, and I'm shocked that I haven't picked Wim Wenders. Alice in the Cities and Kings of the Road are probably two of my favorite films of any genre. And if anybody mentioned road movies to me, I would have picked those out of hand, and then maybe On Radio, On the Road as a novel. And I think the film is really interesting as well. On second and third viewing, particularly, I thought the first viewing I was kind of left cold, but I love that. The Motorcycle Diaries, so many I could have chosen. But listening to your podcast and knowing, being intimidated by your knowledge, I thought, actually, am I qualified to speak to Wenders? I have a very personal connection to those films, but I'm certainly not an academic. So I chose one out of nowhere, popped into my head that I loved recently. I say recently, about, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago now. But I've seen it a couple of times. I hugely admire the filmmaker. So I chose randomly and completely serendipitously with your choice, American Honey by Andrea Arnold.
Brilliant. Well, it's a really interesting film, and I'm glad you picked it because I honestly, this one kind of slipped past me when it came out. I kind of vaguely remember when it came out, but for whatever reason, I never really saw it. So it's been really great to discover this film, and I think there's lots in there to talk about. So I think it was a great choice, a really interesting choice.
Definitely.
And Jonathan, do you want to talk a little bit about our choice that we've put forward tonight for our road movie?
Well, our road movie is Paper Moon, directed by Peter Bogdanovich, and it was released in 1973. And it stars, sorry, um, Ryan O'Neill, who was a great star of the sort of 60s and 70s, and his daughter, Tatum O'Neill. And yeah, it's actually set in the 1930s, I think, and it's a black and white film and terrific. And these two films, I reckon, are amongst the most perfect sort of film swaps because they just have so much in common,
It's
which is
it's
quite
incredible.
bizarre considering we just picked them out of the air.
I couldn't believe it. I hadn't seen Paper Moon. I thought I had, but I get confused with Bogdanovich and Robert Altman.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
don't know why, but I thought when I saw Paper Moon, I immediately thought, well, I think what I'm confused is Nashville and The Last Picture Show. I think I get those two films mixed up.
right.
So when I put on Paper Moon, I was completely floored by what it was, and then almost immediately thought, oh my god, this is could be a remake.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah,
Mental.
yeah,
Absolutely mental.
it's extraordinary.
And
It is
unplanned.
indeed.
Like,
And it's a wonderful film, Paper Moon. I discovered it years ago. I think once I just randomly sort of watched it on television when it was on one night years ago and just absolutely fell in love with it. It's just a wonderful, entertaining, funny,
yeah,
um, film, but it's got a lot of, sort of interesting things to talk about. Set in the Depression era,
Yeah,
and the incredible chemistry between Ryan O'Neill and his daughter playing the little girl. Um, that they end up going on their adventures on the road to get her $200.
yeah.
And it's fantastic film. Shall we start talking about Paper Moon tonight first? I think we'll just go chronologically because Paper Moon came out in 1973, and this was right at the height of Peter Bogdanovich's sort of. It was kind of at his career peak in terms of his
Yeah.
sort of commercial and critical acclaim. I think he just came off. Was this just after The Last Picture Show, or I think maybe he did What's Up, Doc?
yeah. I think that
Uh,
was three in a row for him. I think.
Yeah.
yeah. So What's Up, Doc had Ryan O'Neill in it, and then I think they sort of carried over. And the film stylistically certainly has a lot in common with The Last Picture Show in terms of it's shot in black and white.
Yeah,
It has a lot of really wide angles and a lot of beautiful sort of photography and things in it, and also very naturalistic sort of acting but on the other hand too, it's also incredibly just a really entertaining, fun
mm.
picture, like very, very funny, lots of really, really funny moments in it,
Hmm.
and lots of just terrific entertainment all the way through it. So, Jonathan, what did you think of Paper Moon?
Well, this is one of the films I hadn't seen, but I'd read about in Easy Riders and Raging Bulls, which I'm constantly going on about, virtually every episode
Well,
of
it's a
this
great book,
podcast.
isn't it?
It is a great book, especially if you're into the sort of new Hollywood films. And yeah, I was a bit shocked first of all. It was black and white because I think the sort of the screen on Amazon Prime or on YouTube was a color picture of the two of them sitting in front of an old car, and but I really liked it. I loved the sort of I guess there's certain it's quite light in tone. even though it deals with some, as you say, it's in the 30s, this sort of depression. It's quite sort of, in some ways, it's quite a sort of depressing story and scenario, but it still managed to keep it light. It's funny. It's got some lovely music in it, and yeah, terrific movie. Really enjoyed it. A great choice there.
Okay, Ken, do you have any sort of opening thoughts about Paper Moon?
My opening. I have thoughts. I know if they're opening. They might well be closing. My thoughts were, so as I said, I hadn't seen it, and I didn't. I thought I knew what it was, but I really didn't. So I guess 10 minutes in, and I'm thinking, Grapes of Wrath for me is a seminal book for me. Basically, like probably a lot of my politics come from that book. So immediately I thought, okay, this is Grapes of Wrath country, and that's
Yeah.
what we're going to go into. And then suddenly, like that's the funeral scene and all the first scene. You think, okay, I kind of know what it is. Then it's like you say, it's entertaining and funny, and which of course it is. But the way she plays it, she's so good. It's like on the page, I reckon it's really light, and it's almost a comedy. But she's so great, it's a drama
Yeah.
with little set pieces in.
Mm.
So yeah, I thought they were brilliant. I was thinking he reminded me of, I was trying to, is it Ryan Gosling or George Clooney in Oh Brother or some, he was kind of, there was this almost kind of not taking himself too seriously, which I think is great in a leading man. But her performance, which obviously I've read about, and it's kind of just trivia, really. But incredible.
Does she still remain the youngest person to ever win
I think so. Anna
an Oscar?
Paquin maybe came close to she. I don't know. I was thinking of Anna Paquin, watching it. But yeah, it's a brilliant film. Absolutely brilliant. Like so much to love about it. It totally. I think probably like everybody these days, especially watching at home, I'm guilty of watching things in sections. But I put it on last Sunday morning early, and I watched it in one go. So that's the highest compliment I can give a film, I think. Atrocious thing to say.
So it's a bit similar with me because I put it on a bit too late, and I thought, at one stage I thought I'm really tired, I got to go to bed, and then actually no, I can't. This is great. I was wide awake, even though it was way too late to be wide awake, and I just kept on until the end. Yeah.
It is one of those films that just sucks you in. It's very episodic in a sense, but it does draw you into their world, and then you just really feel like you want to find out what happens to them.
Yeah, it's just the pacing is so great. I don't know if it's the plot that really got me. It was just the characters, I think, in the pacing of the film just seems funny. You say episodic. It just all rolls into one really nicely. Yeah, brilliantly made film.
I think maybe just for the listeners' benefit, if they're not familiar with the film, I can just give a very, very brief kind of synopsis. The story revolves around a little girl, and it opens at the funeral of her mother. And a man shows up at the funeral who obviously had some sort of a liaison with the mother at some stage. We don't know. We don't really get a lot of the backstory or the history of the relationship or anything in the film. But it's implied that this man potentially could be the little girl's father, but that's never really established, is it, with any certainty? It's just that he says he just happens to be driving through. He heard she'd passed away, so he showed up at the funeral. And then the people who are looking after the little girl basically just say to him, "Look, can you take this little girl and drive her to her aunt's, who lives somewhere in, where is it, in Arkansas, or is that it, or is
Missouri?
I'm sorry, I can't quite remember."
St. Joseph,
So
Missouri.
they're in Kansas, and then her aunt lives in St. Joseph, Missouri, it says here on my notes.
Yeah.
So so basically, he reluctantly agrees. He quite clearly um, doesn't really want to take her, but he is compelled to, and so off they go on a journey. At first, he tries to ditch her at the train station, doesn't he? He takes her to the train station, buys her a ticket, and just intends to leave her there. But then she points out that he owes her some money because he had taken her to someone in the local town who I can't quite remember what the exact circumstances were about the
Grain merchant
relationship of the
somehow.
man there, but basically he extorts $200 out of him um, uh, under the pretext that he needs to support the little girl. So he takes his $200 and then he keeps it for himself, and then the little girl kind of says, "Well, you owe me $200 and I'm not going to let you go. Just drop me off until I get that money." And so what happens is they go on this trip to go and earn this money back by selling Bibles, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Like
a
this
note
guy's a
there.
bit of a grifter, isn't he? He's like a bit of a he's a little bit of a con artist, a little bit of a shady character, and he obviously goes around selling Bibles to people and under sort of false pretenses to sort of trick them into buying these Bibles at quite inflated prices as well.
Yeah. But he does it rather cleverly. He sort of finds out the name of somebody who's recently died, gets their name, gets the wife's name printed on the Bible, and then goes and sells it. No, goes and gives it to the wife as a sort of last present from the deceased husband, generally. And yeah, but that has that a little bit sort of the sting in it, sort of this 1920s, 1930s sort of con
Yeah.
artist work
Hmm.
seemed to be a sort of thing then. There
Well,
seems
yeah,
to
and
be,
in the Depression, I guess people were just trying to find any way that they could to
yeah,
get by and to try and get ahead. Much like when we talked about in our last show when we were talking about Scarface, which would have been set. Well, Scarface would have been made around the time that this film was set,
yeah,
and it has very much that same backdrop. But rather than in a big city with gangsters and criminals, what we're talking about here is grifters traveling around from door to door, and town to town, and just trying to use whatever little cons that they can to make some money and then move on to the next place. So that's how they do it. And very soon, the relationship between the two characters develops, and the little girl turns out to be quite a natural herself
yeah.
at doing these little cons and grifts and things. And so the two of them end up having lots of adventures together along the way.
It's
So,
got
Ken,
a great,
what did you make of the? Um, because the film's very light and entertaining, and on the surface, you could be forgiven for thinking that the film doesn't have a lot of necessary a lot of depth to it. You could just treat it just strictly as a piece of light entertainment, really, and it certainly works on that level because of that. But what did you make of the kind of Depression era setting
Yeah.
and some of the circumstances of the characters and how they interacted with their, for lack of a better term, I'll call them victims, or and some of the other incidents that they experience along the way.
Yeah. Like I didn't read it as a comedy.
Mm,
I like on reflection I thought, well, okay, it's funny, but I took that and I think it might be my relationship with Bogdanovich in that because of Easy Rider, the book Easy Rider Raging Bull, um, I associate him with like an edge. And I think that's why I get him mixed up with Altman and all that era.
Mm.
I see him in my mind as like this cool character. And I've come to realize I don't really know his work that well, bar Last Picture House and now this, really. I don't even know if I've seen the others. But I took it as like he's quite a conservative filmmaker
Mm.
in a disciplined formula, like in a formula way.
Mm.
Um, so I read it like, first of all, Grapes are off straight away. So that's all I was really looking at.
Yeah.
I thought immediately the father thing, is he or isn't he? I immediately knew like it doesn't matter, and I was thinking of the end of Grapes of Wrath with the breastfeeding. Like family doesn't really matter; everyone has to come together, kind of thing. So that helping was, I thought, really obvious. Then I guess the prostitute thing was a bit kind of silly. Um, that kind of took me out, but I really did feel sorry for her. The
Mm. What you mean, the
Trixie
Madeline
Delight.
Kahn
Yeah,
character?
when she
Yeah.
when she was kind of grifted out of it, I thought, oh, she's just trying to get by, and
Yeah.
like felt really sad for her being, that could have been they could have been happy. I thought the black girl was interesting,
Mm.
and I didn't quite know what to make of that, in terms of
Yeah, and in
context.
many ways, she was quite almost like one of the most interesting characters in the film,
Yeah,
wasn't she? Because
yeah,
she's someone who was, like the rest of them, kind of a, a, a victim of circumstance and ended up finding herself caught in this situation with no real way
yeah.
out of it.
But her like she actually said it, I guess. So like
Mm.
her, like that was her role in it. You know what I mean? That was
Mm.
basically she on the page. That was her thing. Whereas everybody else had little bits to do, and then you just got it through the performance. Maybe there was one other thing that I thought was great was the um, the FDR thing, and I wondered was that in the book, or how did they almost cut it, because I didn't quite feel it paid off in the end.
Mm.
Knowing what I know, like I don't know much, but with the New Deal and with all of that,
Mm.
obviously it was a comment, but every so often she would go off. She'd talk about she's writing to the president or something, was it? Or so I thought that was interesting, but maybe didn't quite pay off. So yeah, I thought the comedy came last for me, and I saw it really as just this really interesting take on that era. But yeah, it's probably totally incorrect reading based on like a prejudice.
Well,
Well,
I don't
yeah,
know, Jonathan. I mean, could you talk a bit about Peter Bogdanovich, because it's interesting that Ken, that you mentioned about the fact that you're not really familiar with a lot of his films, and the sad reality is obviously he, um, after this film, I don't think he had a lot more big commercial successes after this. I think this was kind of that very early 70s, and then after that, he was much a lot like William Friedkin and some of the others, where he started because of his reputation and the success that he had. He then after that made quite a few big projects that actually ended up not being as well received, and his reputation, I guess, I don't like to say that it sort of diminished somewhat
Mm.
over the years later, didn't it?
yeah. Well, yeah, he made. I remember in the 80s seeing Mask, which has Cher in it, which was
Yeah,
sort of fairly big at the time, but it's not
it
not
was.
not on
Yeah.
the scale of this one, I don't think.
No, and it's not a film that people really talk about much anymore, is it?
Right.
Mask. I mean, I do remember when it came out, it was a bit quite a high profile film, but it's now, people seem to have kind of forgotten about it a little bit, really.
Yeah, he made another one, Cat's Meow, which has Eddie Izzard in. I remember reading about that in the papers when it came out about 20 years ago. But yeah, he'd sort of, I mean, before he started making films, he was sort of writing books and things like that, wasn't
Yeah, it
he?
was theater, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Mm.
and
I
he was,
remember listening to him on Mark Maron's podcast. Have you heard that?
No.
W2F, WTF.
Right.
Yeah, he came across really well, and that was a couple of years ago before he died.
Yeah, because he only died in January last year.
Yeah, so I think this may be 2 years before he died. Maybe he was
Right.
definitely held. Like I remember thinking, God, he sounds really young. He sounds really. He's kind of like hip. He's a cool guy. He was
Yeah.
very well read, like big theater guy.
Well, he worked as a film critic as well, didn't he? Before he
Yeah.
actually started making films, he did a lot of writing and film criticism, and then he sort of got into filmmaking with, I guess, via Roger Corman, wasn't it? He made the Targets with Boris Karloff.
Yeah.
Was his sort of directorial debut, which is quite an interesting film in and of itself. And then he kind of got lumped in, as I said, with people like William Friedkin and all the sort of the film school, the LA film school kind of people that came up that we now know as New Hollywood, like Coppola and Scorsese and Steven Spielberg and people like that. So he's kind of that generation, isn't he? And
I went to
and he
the
did have this little string of really great and very successful and acclaimed films. And also he's quite interesting, well known as sort of like a very key figure in the Orson Welles story, isn't he? Because when Orson Welles kind of came back to America in kind of the late 60s, early 70s, he basically sort of kipped on Peter Bogdanovich's couch, didn't he? For a number of years, they became friends. I don't quite know how that developed. I guess maybe Peter Bogdanovich just interviewed him for something or
He
befriended
did.
him in some way.
I actually know this because
Oh, brilliant.
he actually did talk about this on WTF.
Hmm.
He was asked to do the retrospective in like the Met or somewhere like the MoMA or somewhere on Wells because the curator there at the time wasn't a fan and he knew Bogdanovich was, or he was a film critic. He was only 22 or something. So he was asked to curate, like get all of Wells' films in, and that's how the relationship developed. I think that was while he was in Europe.
Yeah, but they ended up kind of developing quite a close friendship, and I think Orson Welles essentially lived with him for a number of years, and they helped sort of facilitate each other's projects. And I think Peter Bogdanovich is one of the main stars of the Other Side of the Wind, which was a film that just recently was finished. Netflix financed it was like a film that Wells was working on in the sort of the last decade of his life, and he tried to finish it. And Peter Bogdanovich also was involved in that because he was obviously quite close to Wells in the project. He was one of the key people involved in the restoration and the finishing the edit of the film and getting it ready to release it on Netflix a few years ago. And sorry, go ahead, John.
There's a Orson Welles element in this story as well because it's based on a book called Addie Pray, which is about that was the name of the girl Addie, and they'd sort of given themselves the surname of Pray because they're selling Bibles, I suppose. And but I guess it's not a great name for a film, Addie Pray. And so Peter Bogdanovich came across this old song. I think this what's his name, Fitzgerald version of it called Paper Moon. It's called It's Only a Paper Moon.
Yeah.
And so he suggested it to Orson Welles, and Orson Welles came back with the perfect answer. He said, "That title is so good, you shouldn't even make the picture. You should just release the title." It's just perfect Orson Welles answer.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
But one of the things I really like about it is the sort of dialogue. It's got some great sort of quotable lines in it as well. And at one stage, old what's his name, Mr. Prey, says, "You just have to keep on veering. That's all." Great line. And the Miss Trixie Delight, this sort of his sort of sometime girlfriend, when somebody comes in, part of the story, she responds to this new sort of suitor and says, "Well, ain't you a show dog?" Great, another great. Anyway, but I won't go into any more. But there's lots of great lines like that in there, which is one of the great sort of pleasures of the film, I think. One of the things we should mention, it's filmed in Kansas and Missouri, which we'll come back to, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I was researching it, there's in Kansas you can go on an Addy Parade or a Paper Moon tour. The sort of Kansas tourist board have set one up, and some of the locations and all this sort of stuff.
Well, what do you make of the relationship between I mean, obviously in real life, the two of them were father and daughter, but in the film, that as we've talked about, it's not really made. It's left ambiguous whether he's actually the father or not. But they have quite an interesting sort of antagonistic relationship with one another, don't they? Which is obviously more pronounced at first because he's sort of found himself stuck, if you will, with this companion that he hadn't planned on having. But what do you think, Ken, about the relationship between the two of them and how they kind of manage that relationship through the film?
Well, yeah, I think, and I'm doing a disservice to the writer, so I don't really mean this, but I think on the page, this could have been easily a forgettable film. It's, as you said, it's episodic, and that's a good thing if it's done well, but it also could be, formulaic.
Well,
So
road movies, almost by definition, to
yeah,
a certain extent, have to be episodic, don't they? Because that's the idea that they're traveling along the road, and it's what they encounter as they go along.
Yeah, but you think, oh, then now this is going to happen, but the flow and the pacing is so important. And I thought that all came from their chemistry, and both those central performances are so good, so gripping. I forgave is strong, but I put up with a lot of okay, this is happening. Didn't really matter because they were so watchable. And again, they're a bit old fashioned as well. Now you think, oh, it's a good. Some of the scenes are kind of set up quite clearly, but all that aside, I was just so impressed and loved the performances so much. It didn't really bother me. Like, I just went with it so much. It's I haven't thought of a performance like that little girl, like Tatum O'Neal, for ages. I can't actually remember. She blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. So yeah, I think that's what holds it all together. And I guess because knowing what we know now, their relationship was very tempestuous off the screen. I don't know what it was like, obviously, when she was 10 or 9, but the skill of Bogdanovich, and I've directed children, and it's dreadfully hard. So the skill of Bogdanovich to create that atmosphere, I mean, that's the real win, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's the way it sort of develops is extraordinary, from the sort of the antagonism to the sort of friendship and companionship, which is great, and it keeps you guessing. I guess till the very end, actually.
Yeah. Did you catch the Irish film The Quiet Girl on Colleen Queen last year?
No.
It was nominated for an Oscar, Best Foreign Language. It's a huge deal in Ireland. It was one of the most successful films. But there's not too many parallels, but there was one scene in particular that I thought, oh my God, that's The Quiet Girl. But I'd recommend that if you haven't seen it. It's a beautiful film.
Okay. Well, definitely keep an eye out for that. Do you think because one thing that strikes me about Paper Moon is that I don't think it falls, and I think it's part of the reason why it works so well, is it doesn't really it doesn't really fall back on easy sentimentality, does it really? I mean, maybe perhaps the ending a little bit has that element to it, but they're along the way. Both of the characters, and she's a little girl, but she still has a sort of a worldly wise way about her, and sort of a the two of them relate to each other in a very tough way, don't they?
Yeah.
And I think it's quite interesting. And you mentioned about the young girl who's the companion of Madeline Kahn, and she's quite a poignant figure actually. And when she sees an opportunity to get out of her situation, she of course takes it. But you also are left a little bit wondering, did she actually go in the end, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Or are they going to continue to be caught in that
Mm.
codependency, going forward? Um, and I don't know what you guys thought about that.
Well,
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but it makes a lot of sense.
it seems because of the sort of the fragile nature of society at that time, everybody's sort of clinging to each other, like they've all sort of just ship's just sunk, and they're sort of all holding
Mm.
onto the wreckage, basically,
Mm,
because it
Yeah,
is
you're kind
such
of
a life.
alone, and you find this family dynamic where you can find it.
mm,
Yeah,
But maybe it's better they, even if they don't know if he's the dad or not, they just go with it because the family structure was, for various reasons different, which we'll talk about later.
yeah,
You find what you can at that time.
yeah. You think that might be a good place to move on to the next one?
I think I was literally just thinking the same thing, because that's kind of a good segue into what in many I mean, they are quite interesting companion pieces, these two films. When we talk about American Honey, was there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about Paper Moon just before we moved on?
I had two quick things. I said that I hadn't done any research, but I quickly did because as a lapsed Catholic boy, I recognized Saint Joseph as the patron saint of travelers and workers, and I
Ah,
thought, was that in the book or was that just a note? And I thought that was interesting, and I thought the final shot. I
Hmm.
really really liked the final shot.
yeah,
Really got me.
Yeah, very
yeah,
very beautiful, and uh, a beautiful metaphor, if you will, as well. Just
Yeah, bit on the
lovely.
nose, but worked so well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really great. Okay, well, listen, we're gonna, I think, move on. But first of all, just a quick, if people want to check out Paper Moon, and I think they definitely should, if they want to see a really, really great and entertaining film. Ken, how did you watch Paper Moon?
I watched it on. I think it's on Sky. Is it? I definitely didn't pay for it,
Oh, okay.
so it's
Oh,
on
so it's like
stream.
on their sort of Sky Cinema
Cinema.
thing, streaming platform.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll check, but I
Oh, well, it's
think
okay. I mean, it's
I
just
definitely
what we
just
usually just, if a listener is kind of interested in
yeah.
checking the film out, we just kind of want to give them point them in the right direction to make it easier to find.
So I
Because
searched
this
my
is not like a mainstream big current blockbuster
mm,
film, so it isn't necessarily going to be rubbed under people's noses like the new Wonder Woman film is or whatever. So
yeah. Let me just check quickly. Where did you watch, Jonathan?
I watched it on YouTube, but it is also on Amazon Prime. But it was actually £1 cheaper on YouTube than it was on Amazon Prime. I
All
had to
right,
rent it,
maybe I'll watch on Prime then. Maybe I'll watch on Prime. I have that
oh, okay.
subscription, so I just maybe.
but it's
Okay,
on
so these were rentals, were they? Like
rentals.
Jonathan, you
Yeah,
rented it?
yeah. It's also on
Yeah.
Google Play, Apple. It's quite
Oh,
now.
so it's pretty widely available.
Yeah.
Okay. I watched it on Blu-ray. I watched it on the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray, which unfortunately I can't say whether that's still in print or not. But it's a lovely disc, and it's got some extra, like a commentary by Bogdanovich, and it's got a nice little booklet with some articles and some contextual information. And there's a couple other sort of behind the scenes sort of segments and things as well. So it's a nice little package.
Yeah.
So again, I can't speak for whether that's still in print because it's an older one. It's been out for quite a few years. So um, uh, you'd have to just check that out. But if you're interested, you can go out and find it because it's a great disc. Um, okay, if it's all right, gentlemen, we'll move on. I think what we'll do is take a very short break and let everyone have a minute to compose themselves and maybe take a comfort break at the rest stop and pick up a burger at the cafe, and then the pickup point will be right back here in just a minute. Don't be late because we will leave you behind.
Yeah,
Okay,
moving on.
so
I'm only
we'll
the lead singer.
all right, so we'll be back in just a moment.
Thanks for listening to the Film Swap podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving the show a rating or leaving a review. This helps other listeners find the show. You can follow the Film Swap on social media. We're on Twitter and TikTok at Film Swap UK, on Instagram at Film Swap Media, and on YouTube at Film Swap_podcast, and at Facebook at Film Swap the podcast.
We're back, listeners. Welcome back, and Ken and Jonathan, welcome back. Folks, I just wanted to mention from the message you just heard, it will not have encompassed our website. So I just wanted to briefly remind you that should you be so inclined, you can go to our fantastic, fabulous Film Swap website. And it's easy to remember. The address is filmswap.uk. And if you go to our website, you'll find loads and loads of wonderment and grandeur there, like an extraordinary landscape out in Texas or something. There's loads and loads of wonderful things to look at and see. So go and check it out if you get a chance.
Yeah.
So guys, let's talk about our second film tonight, which is called American Honey. It's quite a recent film, actually. It just came out in 2016.
Yeah.
Directed by Andrea Arnold. And this was your choice tonight, Ken. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind walking us along the road and telling us a little bit about American Honey and why you chose it.
Sure. So American Honey, as I said earlier, road movies are a big thing for me. And this, of all of contemporary road movies, this one stands head and shoulders above everything else, I think. Just and again, like the similarities between Paper Moon are incredible, but I guess the energy of it and the pacing, it was only today I realized it's almost 3 hours long.
Mm.
It does not feel like that at all. It flies by, zooms by, zips by along the highway really, really quickly. Some amazing performances. Was a big fan of Fish Tank from Andrea Arnold, so I kind of knew a bit about her. But this film, I think, is her masterpiece. It's kind of singular and I guess just it captures something, something kind of it's really original. And I think it started. I think Sean Baker has a lot to thank this film for. There's a lot of brilliant films that have come on the back of this. I think it won Cannes, did it? So it was it popped into my head randomly because I was really thinking of the older ones. And then just in a flash, it popped into my head. And I thought, perfect. And I was delighted when neither of you had seen it. So yeah, tremendous film. Not doing it justice, but yeah, I absolutely adore it.
Yeah, it's such a good film. I I'd heard of Fish Tank, but I haven't seen it much. Although now, having seen this, I think right, I am definitely going to see that soon. Yeah, and it is long, but as you say, zips by, and this film really keeps you guessing as well. It's just great.
Do you think, Jonathan, just for the listeners who might not be familiar with the film, do you think you could give us just a little kind of brief synopsis and kind of set the scene a little bit for people?
Well, how about Ken? Ken, you should do that. Is this your?
Okay, sorry, I should do that. It opens, and again, like Paper Moon, it opens in the most depressing of scenes, which again I had forgotten about. And this is my third time seeing it. And I think I forget about the start and how bloody depressing it is.
Yeah.
So it starts with Star, the main character, played by Sacha Lane, who was discovered, I think, in a shopping mall by the director. Starts with her in this kind of abusive. Again, the family dynamic isn't quite explained as per Paper Moon. It's all a bit shady. You don't know whose kids are who, what the relationship is, but definitely it's unhealthy and dysfunctional and abusive. So she then sees this like merry band of pranksters in this in a minibus in a supermarket that she is taking food from the dumpster. So she then Shia LaBeouf offers her a job to join this kind of crew. They're selling magazine subscriptions, and she leaves the kids she's minding with their mother in this weird but brilliant scene in this line dancing barn. Brilliant scene. And she goes on the road with them, and it's like a romance, but it's like it's a drama in that this group is so dysfunctional, anything could happen at any moment. You just know it's going to blow up in some way, but it never really does. But it kind of does. It's simmering, and then it's just you've got the main romantic dynamic. You've got the boss and the crew dynamic, and then you've got all this group dynamic, which is my favorite part of all these kind of castaways together in the minibus. That's my favorite scenes from it. It's kind of how I remember it.
A lot of those scenes apparently were improvised, or
Yeah.
at least partially improvised, with all these kids all crammed in this little minibus together for hours, and they would just sort of film them and let them kind of horse around and have little discussions and things like that. And she would just capture this stuff and then pepper it in throughout the film. So it has a very sort of documentary kind of vibe to it, a feel to it, very naturalistic. And it's done with a lot of handheld camera work and things. So it very much has that aesthetic of being kind of almost documentary style in the way that it's follows along the story.
I think a lot of them are non-actors. We should mention it's Riley Keough as well, who has gone on to big things since. I think was one of her first roles. So she plays Shia LaBeouf, the kind of boss of the crew, and I think she's excellent in it as well.
Yeah, she's quite a fascinating character because she has a real sort of sinister sort of vibe to her, and she also, like, for me, what really struck me about the whole dynamic of this situation is these kids, like, it's almost like a little bit like slave labor in the sense that she's gathered these kids together and she's taking them along sort of town to town selling these magazine subscriptions, but she basically controls everything about their lives. She puts them up, she organizes the motels, she decides where they're stopping, she takes 75% of any money that they make, and she is very strict about, I'm going to drop you off here, I'm going to pick you up here, don't be late or you'll get left behind. And make sure you earn enough money, right? And they have these kind of shaming rituals for the kids when the ones who don't. Yeah, so it really has, she reminded me a lot of, because I used to be a sort of a union rep, and she reminded me a lot of sort of a lot of middle managers that you meet along the way in sort of corporate environments. That she sort of, has this real kind of, it's all sort of on the face of it carrot,
Yeah,
but the stick is right here all the time, and it's always done in very subtle and kind of ways
yeah,
of demeaning and diminishing what you're doing, and threat, sort of veiled threats, and all these kind of things that sort of are used to, um, keep you, um, trying to hit this goalpost that constantly keeps
yeah,
moving.
yeah. We should also mention she
Yeah.
does all this mostly half naked.
Well, yeah,
So
it's very much
every
implied
scene.
that she's sort of zoned out on drugs or
Yeah,
alcohol or something. She's obviously got her own issues with addiction and this lifestyle that they're living, because they just kind of go from town to town, earn this money, and then just sort of party and do drugs
yeah,
and sort of scream and shout and climb on the furniture and all this. And it's quite, what it reminded me of a little bit was, Jonathan, you remember in one of our very early shows we covered Drugstore
Oh yeah, I
Cowboy.
wrote that down. Yeah,
Yeah, and it very
mine
much has
as
that sort of that lifestyle of just sort of this nomadic,
yeah,
sort of traveling
outsiders.
around from place to place, kind of like taking it for whatever you can get out of it, and then moving on to the next thing.
Yeah,
And it is kind of this weird kind of, uh, I use the term quite because it's come up this week in the news with a certain politician that's used the phrase about lifestyle choices, but in a very
yeah.
outrageous context. But we don't need to go into that. But this is, obviously, the lady who's running this thing. This is kind of a lifestyle choice for her, but all the other kids that she's kind of picked up along the way, she's really just sort of exploiting them
mm,
and using them in order to maintain this.
Yeah,
And it's quite extraordinary. And they do, in a sense, they are trapped in this situation. It would be very hard to see how they would get out of it, because if she was to leave one of them behind, and she quite often threatens to do things like that, especially to the lead character in the film, that they would be really literally screwed, wouldn't they?
yeah. But it's sort of indentured labour and
Yeah.
a sort of massive Ponzi scheme. Yeah, but this character Star, who's the star of the film, really. This is sort of part of her life with these people, but that's not all of it, is it? She goes through she's on a journey. Let's put it like
Mm,
that, as metaphorically as well as
mm,
literally. And yeah, she sort of falls in with has this sort of strange relationship with Shia LaBeouf's character,
mm,
who's who has this
Jake.
amazing sort of ponytail that makes him look really creepy. If
Mm,
that's correct. Yeah, he's Jake, and and it's sort of pretty on off, mostly off, it seems. Um, and I don't know, she keeps on trying to sort of connect with other people along the way,
yeah,
but it doesn't really amount to anything. But by the end of the film, which is it's a funny thing. One of the things I wanted to sort of discuss is it a good ending, a bad ending, or does it sort of
mm,
cop out? Is it a cop out? Is what I mean. Because it's, but at the same time, I do feel like she has learned something. She's ready for her next step. We don't see
mm,
that step, but we can see that she's not the same person she was when she left the family that she was living with at the beginning and went on the road with these people.
mm. What did you think, Ken, about that when she left at the beginning? Because the relationship that she had with those children, that obviously they would, I mean, the impression I got is that she was in a relationship with this young man, and the kids were his, but
Ah,
that but but then the actual mother was living locally, and they kind of knew her, and that there's a she obviously cared about these kids and had like a maternal relationship with them,
yeah,
but at the same time it seemed like she didn't struggle too much in the sense of having, when she saw an opportunity to get out of that situation, she just takes the kids to the actual mother
yeah.
and just sort of says, look, they're your kids, I got a job, I'm going. And she doesn't seem massively conflicted there. So what did you make of that?
Yeah, I thought it was. I guess she's 18, but it didn't seem like. Is there a line? It's only like when he says it's only a dance. It felt like that felt like abuse to me, as in there's a pattern of abuse there that
Mm,
she's afraid to go near him. He says it's only a dance. He's this old for context. She's after like shopping for food in the dumpster, gets home, he's drunk, he treats the kids like dirt. She's trying to make this dinner, and then he starts dancing her and kind of feeling her up, and I thought like she looks scared.
Yeah,
And
mm,
definitely.
so I think she's running from abuse, and then I think her reaching out for connections is a pattern of that as well. Like anyone shows her interest, she, is her idea of love and affection is all messed up because of that.
Yeah,
So I thought it was really great. I really liked that. I thought the scene in the with the line dancing is brilliant, and I was kind
mm.
of rooting for her, even though there's a shot of the little boy sitting down in the nightclub that broke my heart.
yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess
Yeah,
it's
that's
hard on
quite
her.
similar to that scene in Paper Moon when
Mm,
the girl, the black girl who's looking after Madeline Kahn's character, Trixie's character, that final shot of her as they run off out of the hotel and leave her behind, there was a real poignancy just
mm,
to that moment in that shot of her just standing there, and well, is she going to go? Is she going to get out of that situation, or is she going to continue to be there?
yeah.
And we do have that sort of that nice linger on understanding that for that person that it's not the end of their story, even if we're leaving
Mm,
them behind. So there's a
yeah.
poignancy there. It's quite powerful.
Like like should we kind of talk about the fact that they're the same film?
yeah. I think we should.
Like incredible that it literally is the same film 50 years later, or what,
Yeah.
80 years later probably. And I was thinking the FDR thing and the looming presence but not mentioned of Donald Trump,
Mm,
it's just perfect. It's absolutely perfect. These and Grapes of Wrath, like these guys are Okies in a van traveling the country trying to sell magazines. They might as well be, you know, the Jode family.
Yeah.
That's it's absolutely perfect. I never really thought of it like that. I don't think.
I
But
mean,
that's
one of
well
the
done.
strangest things is that both films are set in sort of Kansas and Missouri,
Yeah.
and they're
The
both with sort of con people, as it were.
mm.
Um, yeah, it's extraordinary, really.
what's the door to doorness of it, right? I,
Yeah,
I I feel
And
bad
it's
on them calling them con people because they're honest, and like the people in the oil industry that earn the decent wage are probably more corrupt than they are, but they're trying to make an honest dime. But
yeah,
the door to doorness of it, living on your instinct and being left alone, right? You're just
mm.
cut off. You have to fend for yourself. Yeah, it was brilliant partner, brilliant companion films to watch one after the other.
We didn't really touch on it in Paper Moon, but one of the key aspects in both films is the fact that as they travel around and they go to different towns and approach different homes, you can see the differences in the economic
Yeah,
situation of the various communities there,
Yeah.
and how that impacts how the main characters interact with them and the decisions they make about taking advantage of situations, and
Mm.
how they change their stories and their attitudes and things, which is quite interesting because you see these diverse economic situations. They sometimes stop at really wealthy families. Some families are very religious, and other families aren't. Other people are living in real poverty and have issues with, obviously, substance abuse or domestic violence and all
Mm.
these things. And you just get these little kind of snapshots and vignettes all throughout these different communities and these different situations, which is quite, it shows the divides between
Mm.
people, and that's kind of part of what's interesting about that, traveling around and seeing that.
What about that scene where the first house they go to, the daughter's birthday party?
Yeah.
Mm.
They're dancing out in the garden. I mean, come on. It's just perfect. It's
Yeah.
absolutely perfect.
Yeah. And with the mum saying, "I'm just trying to be Christian,"
Yeah, I
and then
try to be Christian.
Yes,
look at your daughter out there.
Yeah, exactly.
yes, it's
Exactly.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. What one scene that was sort of, because the nice thing about the film is it's very sort of open, in the sense, open to interpretation. And as one of the people she sort of pitches up with, Star goes off with, is these three cowboys. I guess they're oil men, but wearing cowboy hats.
Mm.
Mm,
And she
Yeah,
goes,
that's an extraordinary scene, isn't it? Just
yeah.
like it has this amazing undercurrent of. I mean, there's a couple of scenes because there's a scene later on with the oil workers where she agrees to go off with this guy
Yeah.
yeah,
for money, and both of those scenes have this real undercurrent of,
threat,
kind of menace,
menace,
dread,
and threat.
really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Um, and you do feel like, oh, these guys who've picked her up and taken her to this house
yeah,
out in the middle of nowhere, kind of thing, and you really do feel like, man, this could go really
Yeah.
horribly wrong, and she's
It's,
made a really bad judgment here.
yeah.
And
it's
obviously, we
tightrope.
don't want to spoil for people who haven't seen the
Yeah.
film, but
Yeah.
things don't quite turn out how you expect.
No,
But it is extraordinary how she has this kind of naivety to her, in a sense, sometimes when she puts herself in these situations, um, that's quite extraordinary.
yeah, it is. Yeah, real threat. I was wondering, was that just me or no? Obviously, you both felt like, yeah, there was something. It was
No, no,
very
because I
sinister.
mean, yeah, like you're obvious, and I mean, certainly as men, we know that men, if they meet this young, sort of nubile young woman, and she who seems to be, overly friendly, that you know what's going to be going through people's minds,
Yeah,
don't you? And the fact that she gets in the car with these guys and
Yeah.
just drives off to wherever, she doesn't really know where they're going to take her, and
yeah,
what their intentions are.
Mm.
you know um
There is a counter to that as well in Defense of Men. One of my favorite scenes, the trucker,
yeah,
like that really decent guy. He gives a
yeah.
brilliant performance. I don't know if he's an actor or not, or should look it up. But I thought he was really sweet. That
yeah,
scene is played really well,
yeah. Completely agree. Yeah,
and I think that's is that the first time they, because there's a couple of times they talk about what's your dream, which
yes,
can be really mawkish, but works really well in this. It's kind of like your truth of like my dream, and hers is this humble kind of. She wants little
Mm.
kids. She asks the same of Jake, and his is bizarre. That whole duel thing is mental.
Mm.
he's a lot
But
more gone than
like
her.
that truck thing brings an honesty to her character as well. I think really
Yeah,
to see it.
that was one of the things I thought that by the end, that was one of the sort of key learning moments that she'd sort of learnt something there about herself, and she'd sort of seen, or perhaps she'd seen something in others that she hadn't really seen in the way when she'd been into sort of houses of all sorts of people of much wealthier and more sort of privileged in a way than her, but it hadn't made an impact in her. But when she met this person who was just kind to her, and she saw these pictures of his life, that sort of cut through in a different way. Yeah, really
And
extraordinary.
she learned too, because through the earlier parts of the film, when she's getting trained by
Jake.
sorry, what's that chap's name? Shia LaBeouf, is that right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if I ever pronounced that chap's name correctly, but he's training her, and for him, when he goes in, he's saying, "Oh, you go into the houses and you ask the people questions. You could try and figure out what they want and things." But he's trying to do it in a manipulative way because he wants to work out a way to take advantage of them. But you get the sense from her is that when she's having these conversations, especially with that chap in the truck, that she, is looking at it a bit differently, not in the sense of like as a predator, but as a genuine interaction and a connection with somebody. And I think that kind of separates her from the people that she's fallen in with.
But equally, I think they could all have that moment. They all seem lost and decent. I think they bring the newbies in quite. There's a tenderness to all of them, I think.
Yeah.
Except for old Jake and Riley Keough's character, who can't quite remember.
Crystal. Well, you mentioned about the family, because all these kids are obviously, they touch very briefly on all their backgrounds when they introduce each other in the minivan and things. But you all know that these kids are all coming from broken homes or running away from something, or they've just found themselves in this situation. But for them, this is kind of their surrogate, and much like the drugstore cowboy that we talked about months ago. But they've developed this little surrogate family, and for them, this is now where they belong and how they, how they support each other, and they've developed this little, albeit it's a sort of a portable one. It is a family unit, and it's a home that they've found in a sense.
Yeah. One of the sort of film stories that this reminded me of is the documentary "The Magic Trip." I don't know if you've seen that. Alex Gibney, the sort of documentary maker.
I love him.
And it's basically about Ken Kesey and his magic pranksters. And
I've read that book.
Yeah, the electric Kool-Aid acid test. And so they took all this film. They didn't really know how to use film cameras, so that they wasn't synced with the sound or anything. So they had reams and reams of film, but the sound didn't match, and they didn't do the clapperboard or anything. And anyway, then sort of 30, 40 years later, 50 years later, Alex Gibney made this film. They gave him all these reels to he turned this film. Anyway, it's about basically sort of young people traveling around America, sort of on a bus, with creating a sort of surrogate family, sort of high on drugs. So you've got this sort of similarity.
Well, of course, who was driving that bus?
Neil Cassidy of
Dean Moriarty.
Yeah, Dean Moriarty of On the Road. Yeah. So the classic sort of road story, one of the classics.
Wow.
And it just made me think. Yeah, this is sort of like a little bit like on the Merry Pranksters, except sort of 2010s style, with sort of much more grit and less naivety and less sort of hopefulness, basically. More reality, more grim reality.
Yeah, less freedom.
Less freedom.
It's on the road without the freedom of the wind in your hair, because you're, the road is full of Subways and Burger Kings and McDonald's, which is pointedly there's a fast food restaurant in pretty much every frame.
Yeah,
and the road is, not the place it used to be.
That's it. The road is not the place it used to be. Yeah, exactly. One of the funny things, because I watched this on Prime, when the film finished, it said, next suggestion, because it comes up with a suggestion, it said, do you want to watch Dumb and Dumber?
No way. What could I guess?
Well, yeah, another road movie, yeah, of a sort. That's interesting. You know what else it reminded me of too was the that old documentary Salesman, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, the
No.
Maley's brothers,
No.
about the Bible salesman.
Okay.
And
Oh.
that's quite a famous documentary that
Right.
I think it's sort of like early 70s, late 60s.
Okay.
And it's quite a fascinating film that follows around these chaps who are going around selling Bibles door to door,
Right.
and it reminded me of that a little bit as well.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
And what do you think the film? Because a real sort of theme in American Honey is kind of the consumerism, isn't it?
Mm.
About the fact that, as you say, the road is littered with shopping malls and Burger Kings and McDonald's and all the kids, you know, the what little money that they retain from what they earn from selling these magazine subscriptions, they just spend on clothes and you know, you know, just drugs and horsing around and on beer and wine and things like
Yeah.
that, and all the houses that they visit, the Mountain Dew, the one house where she goes with the little kids and the mother's sort of zoned out on
Yeah.
drugs, and
Yeah.
when she looks in the fridge, all they've got is a bottle of Mountain Dew, and it's everything is all these big corporate brand products. Everyone is surrounded by this stuff, and even the poor people. That seems to be they're just surrounded, but with all these things all the time. So, what do you think the film is? I mean, what did you make of that? I guess.
I mean, it's it might as well be a documentary, right? It's
Mm,
almost cliche at this point. I think you have to, well, and it's the skill of the director that it doesn't feel like poverty porn. That you're watching these people going, oh,
mm,
with your kind of middle class eyes and thinking, oh, the social problems. It doesn't feel like that. It feels very real and warm. So I mean, I think it's the set. It's a natural setting, and it's her style. I don't think it's a comment particularly. Much
mm.
more as the Florida Project does it probably better, in that really is about the shadow. Have you seen the Florida Project?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's
Right.
brilliant. It's a
So
brilliant film.
brilliant film, very very similar to this. Not
Yeah.
a road movie, but it's displaced people in the shadows of a corporation like Disney World or whatever,
Right.
Mm,
forgotten poor of America. Um, So yeah, I know what you mean, and I think that's the setting. I don't think it's the point of the film. Maybe.
mm. Well,
Um,
there's certainly nothing preachy about it. You're
yeah,
right. It's
like
just like more observational, and it doesn't really try to make any blunt
yeah,
comment on what you're seeing. It's more just showing those different situations and
mm,
the disparity between different communities, and
the
sometimes
segregation of
just
America.
within the same towns,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the one she often, when she's dropping them off in the van, she'll be saying, all right, the people around here, they got lots of money and they
yeah.
do this, so you want to think about doing this to try and manipulate them. And then other places she'll say, oh, these people haven't got any money at all, so you got to try and
So
do
talk
this.
normal. She says, talk
Yeah,
normal.
yeah, and it's quite interesting, but in every way, like she's totally cynical in the way that she talks about all of the different communities.
Yeah.
But
There's the shiny thing is interesting as well. Like that Jake has the shiny phone,
mm,
deliberately like this kind of shiny thing, and then his jewel thing, and so he's obsessed with that. Where she more looks like there's a lot of sky shots, which I thought was cool. A lot of nature and sky in
Good
it.
nature.
mm.
And I think that's always from her perspective. She's looking up at the sky. He's maybe looking
Yeah,
down at the
and
shiny.
seeing the beauty and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
'Cause that's something that struck me about it, because you guys know I'm Canadian, and so Canada's a pretty big, wide open
mm,
place, and so I spent a lot of my youth sitting in the back seat of the car going, so traveling long distances between places and staring out the window at the at the scenery going by, and this film captures really well that feeling, because sometimes there's the excitement of seeing new things and
Mm.
experiencing something that you haven't seen, but then there's also the tedium and the boredom of just sitting in a car for hours and hours and hours and looking out the window, passively at
Mm.
whatever goes by. And I have lots of memories of spending great chunks of my childhood sitting in the back seat of cars staring out the window
Mm.
while sort of bad pop music is playing on the
Yeah.
radio, as your only form of amusement. And so that to me was something that really struck me about the film, because I could see those scenes when they just kind of showed them sitting in the car, or
Yeah.
sorry, in the minivan, in this minibus, and all just sort of, you know, sitting bored and lost and trapped in their own heads, kind of thinking about whatever it is that's going on. I guess in one case, the one girl just thinks a lot about Darth Vader and his great significance.
Yeah.
And then other people, are thinking about other stuff. And
But
it's capturing those little conversations and things as well that we talked about,
it's
that to me really struck a chord with me, is because I could really sort of empathize with that experience.
it's big sky country, isn't it? And that's
Mm,
the thing about sort of nature, because some of it is this sort of vastness of nature and the sort of the wide shots and the sort of landscapes and everything. But then there's also quite a lot of sort of close-ups of nature, of sort of plants and little bugs and
mm,
bugs crawling on people. The sort of, I suppose, the way that people are sort of,
mm,
well, very close to nature in some ways. And there's that beautiful, beautiful scene where she's sort of up early one morning in the sort of early dawn, and this bear basically
Yeah,
yeah,
I
wanders up
know that.
that was extraordinary.
and sort of.
Where did that come from?
I
Yeah,
mean, I just love that scene. It was so
Yeah,
beautiful because it was sort
yeah,
of. I don't think it was wordless, wasn't it? There was no dialogue, and it
yeah.
was
She
just
just sits there, and it's really, and it's in a part of the film that needs something like that.
yeah,
It kind
yeah,
of felt it needed that surreal kind of thing to happen just to get to the end. It's about 20 minutes out of the end, I think.
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Did you notice there's a real uh, an aspect of her character is obviously her nurturing or her rescuing, because you notice all throughout the film they always have these little moments where she rescues things. Like
Mm,
there's one bit where a bee that's trapped on the window and she
yeah,
catches it and releases it, and then there's the turtle bit at the end, towards the end, and there's other moments like that. And even when she goes and buys the groceries and
mm,
takes them to that family
exactly. Yeah.
that she knows is obviously having a hard time, but there's a real sort of establishment of her character, that she has this kindness and this ability to see people when they're trapped, or people, or wherever, when something's trapped, that she facilitates their rescue in a sense.
mm,
And I thought that was a lovely little bit, that it was nice, subtly
Mm,
peppered throughout the film, that was a real indication of her character. And when you were saying at the end, because the ending's quite ambiguous about, we don't know really what's going to happen to her next, but there is those indications that, this, for her, this is only just the beginning, and that to me, I read it as a very positive ending, because I
yeah,
thought whatever the situation that she's in at the minute, and there's obviously a lot of trouble and in the relationship that she has with the boss character and all that, but I think there's a huge amount of positivity within the film, and you kind of know in a sense that this girl's going to be okay, because she's kind and she's resourceful and she's able to read people, and she's able to, you know um,
yeah,
so I read the film ultimately as being, because even those scenes that we talked about with, like, when she goes to the house, back to the house with those three older gentlemen and stuff, so like I said, things don't go the way you kind of expect, because there's that undercurrent of dread that you
yeah,
feel in those situations, but then they don't quite turn out the way you expect. And I think ultimately the film has quite a positive energy to it, doesn't it?
Mm.
Like it has a,
I think so.
I think it has some hopefulness off in the horizon there, that you always kind of get that sense that, you know,
Yeah.
she's probably going to be okay, you know.
Rihanna will do that, Just put Rihanna in your film
Yes.
and you will feel joyful.
Yeah, well, both films, funnily enough, named after songs, aren't they?
Mm,
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah. Great.
and they both have good soundtracks. I've been listening to some of the American Honey soundtrack. It's
Mm.
massive. I mean, it's like 20, 25 songs or something
Yeah.
in it.
mm.
Enormous number, and lots of stuff I'd never heard of before. But really good. I
Yeah.
like
The
that.
music is brilliant in it.
Yeah.
So, can we talk about the acting a little bit? Because you mentioned that this Sasha Lane, she was discovered. She wasn't a professional
Mm.
actor, was she, when this film was made? I think she's since gone on to do one or two other things, hasn't she?
She's definitely, she's had a good career.
Mm.
I saw her in the dreadful American remake of Utopia. Have you seen that?
Oh no.
You know,
Mm.
Utopia, the Channel 4. The
Oh,
Channel 4, the original series is amazing,
Right.
but I think Amazon remade it, and she
was that
played.
the one with John Cusack in it?
Yes, seen it?
Yeah.
Yes,
No, I haven't watched. I haven't seen either the
but
original
the
or
original is
the.
brilliant. But she plays a key role in the. I only lasted one episode of the remake,
Okay.
and she's done a couple of seen her in a few things.
Mm.
Um, but brilliant performance. I think that's as we were saying about Bogdanovich. This whole film is, I think, just a tribute to the direction of Andrea Arnold to
Mm.
get all of the things we've spoken about across.
Mm.
Like, it's not preachy. All of these things we're looking for. You don't see it. It's not a plot heavy. It's not a comment on
Mm.
poverty. It's not a love story. It's just a really brilliant put together film that you just barely notice go by. And
Yeah.
then
Mm.
when it's finished, you go, "Whoa, wait a minute, what?" And that's, I think, same with Paper Moon. It's just the skill of the director to get all of those things together. Um,
Mm.
it's tremendous.
Well, yeah, it's true. And in both cases, whatever's happening in the films, it's not overt. It's kind
Mm,
of, it's all just subtly a current that kind of runs through it, and it's all about observation and about, those little episodes as it goes along. And whatever conclusions you draw from it, or would come from your own sort
exactly.
of feelings about the things that you see. So, and I think that is a real strength of both the films, is that they don't really hit you over the head with anything particular,
Hmm.
but they are very engrossing. Because you mentioned about the length of the film, I did unfortunately um, have to break it up over 2 nights just
Yeah.
because of my own. Because I had to get up very early the next morning, so there was a certain point where I had to stop it and say, okay, I'm going to finish this tomorrow. But I didn't want to. I
Mm,
wanted to keep going, and it was more just like a sheer practical sort of looking at my clock and going, I really need to
yeah.
go to bed now.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to stop the film. I was totally engaged with it and wanted to keep watching it. So it was only just, that was the only reason why I stopped it. I could have quite happily kept going. Um, sorry, I want to make sure I
Yeah.
say his name
Yeah. I
right, but
think.
Shia LaBeouf, he's one of the few, as you mentioned, sort of professional actors who were engaged for this film, and he's someone who's, I know, in real life, I know there's issues surrounding him. I don't really follow the sort of gossipy stuff, and we don't really, our show's not about that, so we don't need to get too in depth about whatever his personal issues or whatever is going on with him. But what did you make of him and his character in this film, being one of the few sort of professional performers that are in the film.
I
Anyone?
thought he was really good. Sorry, I was waiting for you, Ken, but yeah,
All
I thought
right,
he
go
was
ahead.
amazing. He just fitted in perfectly
Yeah.
with these guys, and I mean, he plays quite a sort of strange, quite a sinister character, really,
Yeah.
manipulative and sort of I don't know, yeah, pretty slightly unpleasant.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
never know where you are with him because and the relationship is just because he develops a relationship with her, and on the one hand, he seems to genuinely, there seems to be a real sort of romance blossoming there, but then in the next minute, it seems like he's, like you say, a bit more sinister and like he's
yeah,
kind of betrayed her, and that you never really know where you stand with him,
no,
and that never really gets resolved even towards the end of the picture. You still are left with the sense of, you don't really know whether you can trust this guy or
no.
what he's really all about.
And I thought that was good. You know, that's
Mm,
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
great
He's
role.
excellent in
Great,
it.
yeah,
As you
yeah.
say, it's a shame about his personal life. He has had issues, but I really liked him in this, and I think there's three films that I've seen of his that are very similar to this. You've seen Honey Boy. Honey
Hmm.
Boy is it autobiographical, or there's something, a personal connection to him in it. Maybe he
Hmm.
wrote it or something. And there's the Peanut Butter Falcon one. I don't know if that's the correct title, but
Hmm.
it's a kind of, maybe it's more deep south, but similar kind of socio-economic kind of setting, but
right.
very good. He's a very similar character in that. Um, so yeah, I
Well,
think around this time when he does roles like this, really suit him. You know,
well, he
transform.
does he's someone who like back because he was like a child actor or something, wasn't he? He came up kind of in a television
Yeah,
program,
yeah,
and then he was in those Transformer films, and on the basis of that, I handed, I'll just be honest, I found him incredibly annoying as a personality. And, but I did, again, to hats off to him that subsequently he's tried to sort of move away from that kind of celebrity and those kind of things. And he's really tried to, pick things that are more interesting and more challenging and diverse roles and things. So yeah, whatever his, again, like I don't really know a lot about. I do know that he's had some issues, but I don't really know anything about it, and I'm not that interested. But
I think, like, for the
but
record, it is. It's. I don't think it's like trivial. I think there is like domestic abuse charges there.
right,
It's not
right,
like,
yeah,
All right.
I think they're like the kind of well-known singer FKA Twigs. They were in a relationship,
okay,
and she has come out and said he was like really, there's abuse and kind of controlling behavior.
All right.
all
So
right,
yeah, there is substance,
okay. So
um,
potentially it's something he may not be able to come back from, or at least not
it
right
does
away.
feel like that, doesn't it? Yeah, it does feel like that. But
Right. Well, I mean, he is. I think he, on the strength of more recent things that he's done, I think he does. He is a talented actor, and that's all I can really say. I
yeah,
don't, like I said, I don't really, and really, Film Swab. We're not here to sort of gossip about people's personal lives and stuff.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
here to just talk about films and good. And in the context of this film, I think he's an interesting character and he gives an interesting performance, and he's good in it. Um, just like, well, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Riley. How do you pronounce her
Kyo,
surname? Kyo,
Kyo.
Kyo, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's terrific in this because she does have this real sort of menace and
Mm,
thing to her that she's quite effective in this. And I think those two were the only two, you know, um,
Professionals.
established professional actors who were in the film.
Yeah.
Um, so they do lend a little bit of weight to it as well. So,
Riley Keough, who is Elvis Presley's granddaughter.
yeah.
oh, is she? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, it shows you now. Like, I honestly don't know anything about these people beyond, what when they're in films and stuff. So I don't really
Yeah.
know. I can always just sort of vaguely hear about stuff. and I kind of know that things are going on, but I don't pay much attention to it,
Yeah.
so I don't.
I thought
Anyway.
she's excellent in. Have you seen Logan Lucky?
No.
Oh yeah, oh I like Logan Lucky.
Yeah,
That's brilliant. That's
very
a
funny,
brilliant
and
film.
she's
Yeah,
brilliant in. I thought. Um,
yeah. That's a very, very funny film. I like that one.
but going back to Shia LaBeouf, if you haven't seen Honey Boy, that is he did write that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I think gives context. I think he had a bit of a funny childhood and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So good for context and a good performance. I remember. I don't remember too much about it, but I remember liking that film.
Well, I quite remember him in that Brad Pitt one about the tank crew.
Oh,
He's in
Fury.
that, isn't he? Fury, which I thought he was quite good in that because again, he was that slightly menacing
Mm.
sort of someone who seemed a little bit on the edge, and you didn't quite know where you were with him. And I quite thought he was good in that as well. So hats off to him for his performances anyway. Whatever else is going on with him,
Yeah.
whatever. Good luck to him. So anyway, well, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about American Honey?
It's a great film. Go and see it.
How
Yeah.
did we all watch it? I just rented it on Apple TV. That's how I watched it.
I rented
I
it on
rented it
Prime.
as well, even though I have the DVD somewhere stacked in one of my files. I couldn't be bothered looking at it, so I rented it on Prime.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Same with you, John?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So it's out there. I think it's pretty easily available on all the sort of major streaming services as a rental anyway.
Yeah.
And you should go check it out. It's a really, really good film. And thank you, Ken, for introducing this to us. Because yeah, like I said, this is one that just kind of passed me by when it came out a few years ago. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really interesting. And it was really striking how how well it fit with
Mm.
Paper Moon, as
Yeah.
the two
Yeah.
of them are what make quite interesting companion films, and
Very much.
Yeah, I was
definitely
delighted as well.
worth checking them both out.
Definitely.
Right. So Ken, thank you very much for joining us today and taking time out to talk to us. It's
Not at
really
all.
great. Is there anything going on with you that you wanted to, like drop a little plug or talk about something
Uh,
that's going on?
there is nothing in the pipeline. Hopefully, we'll be announcing something in the next year or so. But you can see my shorts on my socials and come to stanleys.com, which I think is still live. I'm taking it down currently. And then you can rent my documentary about a powerlifter lift on Vimeo.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. If you could share those links with us, we'll put them in the show notes as well, so that
Okay.
people can have an easier time finding you.
Yeah.
That'd be great, and we'll look forward to checking some of that stuff out.
Sweet. That's great.
Listeners, we're going to be back in a couple of weeks, and Jonathan, I think it's fair to say we don't want to give too much away, but next episode we're going to be it's going to be a bit of a surprise, isn't it? It's going to be
Well,
something a little bit different.
definitely.
We've got some plans afoot, and I think it's going to be pretty exciting. I know I always say that every time, but this time it really is true. We
Will
got
be
plans.
true.
Well, what I'll do is, because obviously I don't want to be too specific, but next episode, Jonathan and I will be going on a field trip.
We will be together.
We will be together in the same place at the same time,
Amazing.
rather than doing it like this over the internet.
Yeah.
So if that isn't super exciting for you, I don't know what could possibly be more exciting than that. So now will be the time, I think, that if you want to, depending on how you're consuming the Film Swap podcast, but if you're on YouTube, you might want to hit that subscribe button. But if you're on Spotify or Apple or Google or whatever other podcast vendors that you use, just make sure you hit that follow button and come back and join us next time, because it's going to be very exciting what we've got planned. So I'm sure you're gonna want to check that out. And in the meantime, drop us a comment, send us a message, let us know what you're thinking. If you want to recommend some cool road movies that you've seen, or you want to comment on any of the things that we talked about tonight, about Peter Bogdanovich or American Honey or anything like that, by all means, drop us a line, and we'd love to hear from you. So on that note, thank you again, Ken, for taking time out to talk to us tonight. It's been great having you, and I hope you'll come back and join us another time and maybe talk about something else.
Defo.
And,
Thanks for having me, guys.
Brilliant. Okay, folks, thanks
Yeah.
for joining us, and we'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye for
Bye.
now.
Oh, the things these nerdy middle-aged men get up to.